The Weight of Silence by Heather Gudenkauf. Chapter 15. Calli. Calli ran down Broadleaf Trail until it intersected with River Bottom, where the trail traveled downward at a steep angle, winding its way down to the creek. Each dip or rise in the forest had its own smell, sweet with spiral flower, pungent with wild onion, fetid with rotting leaves. Each hollow and turn had its own climate, warm and moist, cool and arid. As Calli ran down toward the river and deeper into the woods, the temperature dropped. The trees grew closer together. The vegetation gathered in tight around her ankles. Calli could hear Griff's large body pounding the trail above her. Her chest burned with each breath, but still she ran. Spindly tree trunks and craggy bluffs blurred the corners of her eyes. Patches of sun briefly shone brightly on the ground before her. A stitch in her side caused her to slow and then stop. She listened carefully to the woods. The narrow creek gurgled, a cardinal called, and insects droned. Calli searched for a place to hide. Off the trail, she spotted the remains of several fallen trees arranged in a crisscross pattern, behind which she could rest for perhaps a few moments, unseen. She climbed over the gnarled pile and dropped carefully to the side, away from the trail. Once seated, Calli pulled stray twigs and branches around her to camouflage her pink nightgown. She tried to steady her breathing. She did not want Griff to hear her huffing and find her trapped within the middle of the branches with no escape. Minutes passed with no Griff, only the confronting knock of a woodpecker somewhere above that rang out over the usual forest sounds. Calli shook in spite of the heat and rubbed the goosebumps on her arms. The rage that radiated off Griff needled at Calli's memory, and she tried to close her eyes to them. That day. On that day in December, it was cold. She was 4, and Ben was off sledding with some of his friends. Her mother, belly heavy with pregnancy, was making hot cocoa, plopping white, cushiony marshmallows into the steamy chocolate, then adding an ice cube to Calli's mug to cool it. Calli was at the kitchen table, drawing paper in front of her, and an arrangement of markers around her. "What should we name the baby, Cal?" her mother asked as she set the hot chocolate before her. "Don't burn your mouth now." Calli set aside her drawings. A picture of Christmas trees, reindeer, and a roly-poly Santa. "Popsicle, I think," she replied, pressing a spoon against a melting marshmallow. "Popsicle?" her mother asked, laughing. "That's an unusual name. What else?" "Cupcake," Calli giggled. "Cupcake? Is that her middle name?" Calli nodded, her smile filled with sticky white marshmallows. "Birthday cake," she added. "Popsicle Cupcake Birthday Cake. That's her name." "I like it," her mother said, grinning. "But every time I say her name, I think I'll get hungry. How about Lily or Evelyn?" Evelyn was my mother's name." Calli made a face and tentatively took a sip of her hot cocoa. She felt the burn of the liquid traveling down her throat, and she waved a hand in front of her mouth as if to fan away the warmth. The back door opened, bringing with it a swirl of frozen air that made Calli squeal. "Daddy!" she cried out. "Daddy's home!" She stood on her chair and reached her arms out, snagging onto his neck as he passed by her. The cold that hung on his parka seeped through her sweatshirt, and he tried to set Calli down. "Not now, Calli. I need to talk to your mom." Calli did not release his neck as he clumsily approached her mother, and he shifted her so she could rest on his hip. The smell of beer bit at her nose. "Stinky," she grimaced. "I thought you were getting here hours ago," Antonia said in a measured tone. "Did you just roll into town?" "I've been gone for 3 weeks. What are a few more hours?" Griff's words were innocent, but had a bite to them. "I stopped at O'Leary's for a drink with Roger." Antonia scanned him up and down. "From the smell of things, the way you're lurching around, you had more than a few. You've been gone for a month. I figured once you got back into town, you'd want to see your family." Calli heard the tension in their voices and squirmed to get out of Griff's arms. He held her tightly. "I do want to see my family, but I want to see my friends too." Griff opened the refrigerator and searched for beer, but found none. He slammed the door, causing the glass bottles to rattle against each other. "I don't want to fight." Antonia went to Griff and hugged him awkwardly, her belly an obstacle. Calli reached her arms out toward her mother, but Griff whisked her away and sat her down at the kitchen table, Calli on his lap. "I had an interesting chat at O'Leary's," Griff said conversationally. Antonia waited, poised for what she knew was to come. "Some guys were saying that Loris Lewis has been hanging around here lately." Antonia turned to a cupboard and began pulling dinner plates down. "Oh, he shoveled the drive one day for me last week. He was over checking on Miss Norland. The mail carrier said she wasn't getting her mail out of her mailbox. She was fine. Anyway, he saw me out shoveling and asked if he could help," she explained, turning to see Griff's reaction. "Ben was sick, throwing up. He couldn't shovel, so I went out to do it. He stopped by. No big deal. He didn't come in the house." Griff continued to stare at Antonia, his face implacable. "What, you think we would? I'm 7 months pregnant." Antonia laughed humorlessly. "Forget it. Think what you want. I'm going to lie down." Antonia charged out of the kitchen. Calli could hear her weighted, clumsy steps on the stairs. Griff shot from his chair, raising Calli up with him. The force caused her to bite down on her tongue, and she cried out in pain. The tinny taste of blood filled her mouth. "I'm talking to you," he shouted after her. "Don't you want to hear what everyone is saying?" He moved quickly to the bottom of the stairs. "Come back here!" Calli could see a purple vein pulse at his temple, could see the tendons of his neck strain against his skin. She began to cry loudly and struggled against Griff. "Put her down," Antonia called down to him. You're scaring her." "Shut up! Shut up!" Griff bellowed at Calli, climbing the steps 2 at a time, her neck jerking violently with each step. "Put her down, Griff! You're hurting her!" Antonia was crying now, her arms outstretched to Calli, reaching for her. "Dirty whore! Taken up with him again? How does that make me look? I'm away slaving to make money for this family, and you're sitting here taking up with your old boyfriend?" Spittle flew from his lips, mingling with Calli's tears, and she arched her back violently, trying to escape his grip. Antonia screeched, "Oh my God, Griff, stop it! Stop it, please!" Griff had reached the top of the steps, stood next to Antonia, and yanked her arm. "Slut!" Calli's hysterical wails nearly drowned Griff's ranting. "Mommy! Mommy!" "Shut up! Shut up!" Griff tossed Calli to the floor at the top of the stairs. Her head bounced sickeningly off the hardwood floor, and she was silent for a moment. Her desperate eyes on her mother, who was shoving Griff away from her to get Calli. Griff held tightly to her mother's arm, and she snapped back like a rubber band. For an instant, before Tony tumbled backward down the steps, Griff nearly steadied her. Calli and Griff both watched in horror as Antonia's back slammed into the steps, and she fell to the ground below. "Mommy!" Calli yelped as Griff skidded down the steps to Antonia. He knelt before her, where she was crumpled. She was conscious, her face twisted in pain, her arms cradled around her belly, moaning silently. "Can you sit up? Shut up, Calli!" he barked. Calli continued to sob as Griff settled Antonia into a sitting position. The baby! The baby!" she cried. "It'll be all right. It'll be all right," Griff said pleadingly. I'm sorry. Calli, shut the hell up. Can you walk? Here, let's get you to the couch." Griff gently raised Antonia to her feet and led her to the sofa, where he laid her down and placed an Afghan over her. Just rest. It'll be okay." Calli continued to scream in the background, her weeping getting closer as she made her way down the stairs and moved over to her mother's side. Antonia, eyes half closed, put one arm toward Calli. "Get away!" Griff hollered. "Jesus, stay out of the way and shut up!" Griff's hands were shaking as he snatched Calli up and took her into the kitchen. "Sit here and shut up!" Griff paced around the kitchen, pulling at his hair, and wiped his mouth with one trembling hand. Griff bent down to Calli, her tearful screams dropping to grief-stricken hiccups, and whispered into her ear for 1 full minute. During those interminable 60 seconds, Calli's eyes blinked rapidly at Griff's words. His breath hissed across the delicate crevices of her ear and mingled with her mother's soft cries. Then he stood and rushed out the back door with a gust of wintry, bitter wind, taking away more than he arrived with. That evening, after Ben came home, Calli and Ben sat vigil around their mother as she lay on the couch. Her desperate, mournful moans filled the room until Ben finally called Officer Lewis and the ambulance arrived, just in time to deliver a perfect, silent, bird-like baby girl, whose skin was the same bluish color as her mother's lips. The paramedics swiftly whisked the breathless infant away, but not before Calli gently patted her strawberry-colored hair. Years later, Calli sat amongst the fallen tree limbs, alert and tense, remembering her father's whispers that still hummed in her ear. She heard a rustle from somewhere behind her. It couldn't be her father. Ranger Phelps? Hope rose in her chest. Did she dare to come out from her hiding place? She weighed her options. If she emerged, Ranger Phelps would surely help her get home. But what if they came across her father? He would hand her over to her father, and she wouldn't be able to tell the ranger what happened. No, she needed to stay put. She knew her way home. She just needed to be patient and wait Griff out. He would give up soon. He'd want to get to fishing with Roger. He'd want a drink. The olive green pants of Ranger Phelps's uniform flashed past her, and Calli resisted the urge to leap from the twiggy den she had created and grab hold of the man. Just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone, fading into the lacy ferns, and his footfalls silent among the spongy earth. Calli sat back, tucked her knees beneath her chin, and covered her head with her arms. If Calli couldn't see her father, she figured, he certainly wouldn't be able to see her.